Hello, beautiful soul family. Rebecca here, your vibe mentor, bringing you another video on how to raise your vibration so you can live your best life. I have today for you a beautiful guest by the name of Leandra Rose. For the last 20 years, Leandra Rose has been devoted to the study of human development and potential. She holds a BA in behavioral science and was an early childhood education educator for 15 years, giving her clear insight into the cultural and familiar imprinting that holds people back from their greatest potential. She is now a transformational leader and the founder of the Radiant Rebellion, specializes in empowering cycle-breaking women to release the fears, limiting beliefs, and imprinting that holds them back from becoming the leaders and change makers they desire to be. From teaching meditation to billion-dollar corporations to leading small, intimate masterminds for raising female leaders, Leandra holds an exquisite space that allows her clients to have profound breakthroughs in life, purpose, and business. I am so excited to share this conversation with you. Please enjoy. Hello, Leandra Rose. Thank you for being here. Welcome, welcome, welcome. It's such a pleasure to have you on the Vibe Mentor YouTube channel.
Hi, it's good to see you too. Thanks for having me on. I'm really excited for our conversation today. We've had so many good conversations before. I know today's going to be magical and amazing.
Absolutely. It's a beautiful, beautiful connection already.
Yeah.
So on the Vibe Mentor channel, we talk a lot about healing trauma or the conditioning and programming that holds us back from our purpose so that we can heal that, move through it, step into our purpose, and manifest abundance and help assist in creating heaven on earth. So I'd love to hear your story and how you got involved in working with trauma or reprogramming, conditioning, and the somatic work that you do.
Yeah, everything you just shared about what you do is exactly in alignment with what I do and how I got here. So what you'll probably find for your listeners is that you discover that there's a golden thread of your purpose that goes all the way back to childhood. And sometimes we lose touch with that thread. But once we start to pick it back up and follow our excitement and our curiosities, and we find that golden thread of our purpose, we realize that it goes all the way back. And so that's the case with me, how I got here. Now where I am, I can look back and see how this thread has been woven throughout my life, and that even the difficulties that I experienced in my early childhood were a part of that golden thread. I grew up in what would be called an underprivileged environment in a small town in New Mexico. I am the granddaughter of Mexican immigrants who were poor migrant workers. So I grew up with a lot of stories of limitation, stories about people like us don't XYZ, people like us don't go to college, people like us don't get wealthy, people like us don't have a lot of money or a lot of opportunities. The best thing that we can do, people like us, is work really, really hard and just be good people. Just be good to your family, be good to your community. Don't try to make too much money or, anything like that. Stay small and just appreciate the little things in life. Some of those lessons are beautiful lessons, and others of them really made me question. They made me question the stories that I was being told. It didn't make sense to me that some people would have access to wealth and, from my perspective, freedom, the freedom to choose what they want in life, the freedom to travel. No one in my family ever traveled. I didn't even see an airplane or get on an airplane until I was in my 20s as an adult. So I always questioned this story that people like us don't have access to things. I thought, that doesn't make sense. Why would God put us on this planet and then some of us can only have access to these things and some of us can only have access to these things? So I always had this question in my mind, like, what is that? And as a kid, I saw my peers taking on this story. And one example is someone who was very close to me. He was kind considered a genius in terms of his IQ. We had gotten tested for our IQs at a young age because that's what they do in school. They test you, and if you are gifted, then you get to go to special classes. And it turns out, according to the tests, I was only a couple points off from being quote unquote gifted, and my peer was gifted. So we started going in a different direction. He got to go to these special classes, and I was always envious of him. Like, how is he a genius and he gets to go do these things and I don't? And so that also got me thinking about this idea about genius. What is this? And what does it mean to be gifted? I feel smart. I feel gifted. What is this? And of course, then I took on the story that maybe I'm not as gifted or talented as I think I am. That's another story. But watching him as we got older, and we both had similar upbringings with addiction in our families and abuse and alcoholism in our families. And for whatever reason, I didn't take on as negative of an imprint as he did. And so he started to have, and it could be all kinds of things, but he started to have behavioral issues in school and getting kicked out of school. And eventually he didn't go to high school. He didn't graduate high school. And I did. I ended up going to college, and he ended up going to prison. And so I always had this question in my mind, like, how could this genius, who I was very close with, who's an awesome human being, how did he go on this track that led him to prison, and I go on this track that led me to finding my purpose and all of this? And so I began studying human potential and conditioning and trying to understand how it was that people like him, and I saw that story play out in a lot of people that I grew up with, people in my family, people that I was close with. And what I've come to realize is that it's the stories that we identify with. So he got identified with the traumas, the negative limiting beliefs that got passed down. And I decided to be a rebel and just question everything and decide, like, that's not going to be my story. And so now as an adult, so then I decided to go to be an educator, because I thought, if I can be an educator, I can stop this from happening. If I can have a classroom and show children like him what their genius is and help them tap into that and help them stay connected to that so that they don't lose it, so they don't end up taking on these negative beliefs about themselves. Well, then I became a teacher for 15 years and realized that the institution itself doesn't allow for the individual genius of children to be fully expressed. And so I left teaching about almost 7 years ago now, and I work with adults to help them get back to that original blueprint so that they can do the work that they're meant to do in the world.
Beautiful. And what type of modality do you use to help them do that?
A lot of the work that I do is somatic based, so it's body based. So how do we access the intelligence that's already in the body? So somatic experiencing, breath work, and different somatic healing practices to come back to the body, to find, where is the trauma stored? Where is the story stored? Where's the contraction or the limitation stored? And then helping the natural flow of life. The natural flow of life wants to flow. It wants to thrive, just like the dandelion that pops up through the asphalt. It knows how to find life, right? And so if we can support it through these somatic practices to open up that crack in the asphalt, so to speak, and allow that life to blossom. So I really like body-based practices.
Beautiful. Yeah. And I like to create more awareness around somatic healing modalities. It's not something that has been popular historically, and it's becoming more and more spoken about nowadays. But as you know, I do something called brain spotting, and there is something similar called EMDR, but there's not a lot of options. There's not a lot of education around how to heal and working with the body to heal. And it's interesting because I often have to preface, and I'm sure you do too, the trauma is also just conditioning or programming, right? That people can hear that word complex trauma and they feel like, oh, my childhood was fine, right? But it is that perception of not feeling safe, seen, heard, cared for, or loved that will create that program or that conditioning that, you know, people like you can't do this thing. And then they'll go to therapy and talk about it and talk about it and talk about it and feel like we're really not getting anywhere. And that's, you know, like Einstein said, trying to solve the problem from the level of consciousness that was created, right? The mind is what is holding the problem. The body is what holds the key to healing. So I love to create and help you create more awareness around other somatic healing therapies, because of course we all have our own language and the solution for each of us will be different. So it's exciting to meet you and learn all about the other avenues that you take to do that. So that's beautiful work.
Yeah.
So conditioning and programming. Do you find that when there is a block in the body, do you find that they show up? And this is not something that we planned on, but you know, is that something that you find consistently shows up in the body in certain areas? So I'll give you an example. If someone has a belief that they're not strong enough, they're not capable, or they don't have value and worth, that maybe there's a blockage in the solar plexus area. Or if they didn't feel loved, or they're not lovable, or there's something about them, they'll never find love. Do you find that you see those blockages in the heart area? Are you seeing any correlation between the body and how it shows up relative to the solar plexus?
Yeah, absolutely. Very similar patterns with different people show up different ways, right? So if we have a sense of like a loss of personal power, it will show up in the solar plexus. I deal a lot with soulpreneurs who are bringing their work out into the world. And a lot of times as we bring our work into the world up and out as an expression, we find that there's a lot of blockages or constriction in the throat. Sometimes grief in the heart, or like you said, relationship challenges or blocks can show up in the heart area. Lower back pain is a big one for people who feel unsupported. They feel like they can't ask for help. Those kinds of things show up a lot as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I wanted to hear that from your perspective, because I'm seeing that pattern as well. Another one I see commonly is the upper back, the shoulders, that belief that we're alone, or we have to do it on our own, or it's up to us to figure out.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting too, and I'm sure you see this, when they might start in the solar plexus, it might move through all of those different areas because they're all connected. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and in my work, we talk about the blocks as imprints. So that's the imprint that has come on. We might relate it to trauma or an experience that sort of got stuck there, an experience that we took on as children, a belief that we took on that we have to take it all, that we have to hold it all on our own shoulders, or that we can't speak our truth. So we call that an imprint. And what I help people do through the somatic work that I do is find the blueprint. And that's what I was talking about, the that life wants to flow, that dandelion that breaks through the asphalt. So finding that blueprint, which is the place that always knows that you're okay. So it's in there somewhere, no matter what your experiences have been, no matter what big T or little t traumas you've experienced, or how much chronic pain or dis-ease is in the body, there is always a blueprint. There's always a seed of life in there. Sometimes it's small and subtle, and sometimes it can be pretty profound. But it's helpful to work with a practitioner. It helps you to find that place a little easier. Sometimes our focus is on the pain, and it's hard to find the place that doesn't feel pain. It's sometimes hard to find the place that feels safe and alive. But once you find it, and even as your listeners are listening, you can start to feel that inside of yourself right now. Where is the place inside of me that feels alive, that trusts life? Maybe it feels expansive or light or sparkly, or something that you recognize as life flowing, and bring your attention to that place. And the more that you bring your attention to that place, the blueprint, the quicker the other pieces resolve or reveal themselves, reveal the wisdom that's there.
Yeah. Isn't that amazing too? So the body, we've joked historically, spiritual people have joked how the body is a meat suit, right? It's just a suit that we're, sort of burdened with while we're here in this 3D realm. And as you start to do somatic work, you learn what a beautiful asset it is and how loving and nurturing it is. And, as I started to mend the relationship with my body, I felt as if it was the mother sort of nurturing and holding my soul. And if you look at the body, if you get cut, the body knows how to heal. It doesn't need to be told how to heal that cut. It just needs you to let it heal. And by giving our awareness and our focus and attention to the area that's calling our attention most in our body, we are allowing it to heal. And it's very fascinating how the stories or the imprints, as you say, in your mind can be the block that keep the body from healing. But as we move the mind to the side, as they say, get out of our own way, we allow our focus and attention to come into the body and just be with those sensations, whatever they may be, it will heal on its own. And it's so beautiful and so effortless and easy relative to some of the other modalities that require striving and trying and efforting and focusing. And another thing that you brought to mind as you mentioned that was the exercise we did before we started, just to be in coherence with each other, and how trauma or conditioning or programming will cause us to believe that we're on our own. We have to do this alone. There's something wrong with me if I can't find my own issue and fix it myself. And yet it is so critically necessary that we have the other, that I balance you, you balance me. Together we come into coherence and we create something even greater. And I have found in my own healing journey, I needed that mirror. I needed someone else to help me spot that pattern or to see the conditioning that I couldn't quite make that connection that, oh, when my dad told me I was bad, I'm now afraid of putting my work out there because I might be bad, but I couldn't see that pattern. It sounds so simple when I say it here, but it required someone else to help me see that. And many times, the spiritual beings will feel as if they have to do this alone. And so I just wanted to really call attention to how powerful it is when we come into coherence with each other and amplify the power. The source energy is amplified together as we come together.
Yeah, I think that's a really important piece of the work that we do and resolving trauma. Peter Levine has a quote, and I'm probably not going to get it totally accurate, but he says, trauma isn't what happens to us, it's what gets stuck in the absence of an empathic witness. So when we're children, it's not so much what happens to us, it's what gets stuck there without somebody there to hold space to say, yes, this was hard and you're going to get through it. So like you said, the body heals so much more quickly if we go there, if we actually empathically, compassionately connect to the places that hurt instead of rejecting or judging or trying to push it away or trying to numb it or distract ourselves from it. But just like a child can resolve trauma. We're incredibly resilient as children if there's an empathic witness who can sit with them in the pain and say, I see you, I feel you, and I know you're going to get through this, and I'm right here with you. But what happens a lot is we experience the pain or the trauma as children, and we have an adult who's like, oh, I can't look at that. I wasn't taught how to be with your pain. And so the child ends up picking up this idea that my pain is not okay. I'm not okay. I have to figure this out on my own. And then we take that into adulthood.
And then it subconsciously stems even further into who they are, and inherently they become the problem. There's something wrong with me, and there's something wrong with who I am, and there's something wrong with what I need. And that is stuffed below this trauma because the body keeps the score, right? So who you were and what you need was the original core blueprint, as you say, and it keeps getting pushed down farther and farther with every moment that we lack that beautiful, compassionate witness. And I love that you say it that way. And it really helps explain why inner child work is also such a critical component to this, that we become the wounded child as well as the empathic witness at the same time. right? And so people talk about showing up for yourself or not self-abandoning, right? That's all, again, a trauma response. And that is the solution is to be that empathic witness for the wounded inner child. And we can do that for ourselves. But again, it's even more powerful when you're in the witness of the other. And even our nervous systems are in training to the other, and you holding that safe space for the person healing on the other side allows their nervous system to entrain to you, allowing the limbic brain to open up and say, okay, it's safe to explore this. It's safe to allow this to come up. So there's so many different facets to how that plays into this healing process.
Yeah, absolutely. And while yes, we are our own empathic witness, what you said is so important, that it really does require another person who's grounded and regulated in their nervous system to teach the wounded nervous system, like, okay, now it's safe. Now it's safe to relax. It makes me think about, in nature, animals, when they experience trauma or fear, whatever happens in nature, they shake it off.
Mhm.
And we can do that as well, but we are wired to be connected. We are wired to heal through connection. And so that's why it's so important to have an empathic witness, somebody else, be there with us. It's the equivalent of shaking it off for the animals in nature, but for us, we've got to have another nervous system to entrain us
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
be able to let go of the trauma.
Yeah. Just like clocks on a wall will entrain to each other. That's how we operate. It's calibration as well.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. So where does this come from? We've talked a little bit about that. It's the in conditioning and the programming from when we were children. It can happen when we are either in those 0 to 7 years. I find that 14 is a pretty critical age. I don't know if you've noticed that pattern as well. And then it can also happen in a toxic relationship later in life. So essentially, any point in your life where you felt that you were not safe, seen, heard, cared for, or loved for an extended period of time is usually how I see it show up. So that causes that imprint, and then it is placed in the body, and that's why we work with the body. So what are some of the symptoms that you see as evidence of this? If someone is working through maybe abundance blocks, or I work a lot with conscious, purpose-driven entrepreneurs, they're not able to find their purpose. They forgot what makes them light up or what turns them on. What are some of the symptoms that you see in your work and that help you kind of pinpoint the source of the challenge?
I think some of the biggest symptoms are not trusting themselves. It's like people will say, I don't know. But really, when you start to ask them questions, I'm sure you get this with your clients too, like, you actually do know what you like. You actually do know what you're excited about, what you're curious about, what you want to be doing with your life. You do. You just haven't been trusting yourself. And I have found that can go all the way back to birth imprints. So one of the biggest imprints that people receive, especially if they were born, say, in a hospital, is the first time that we get imprinted with outside authority is more important than your own intuition, than your own natural impulses for life. That's the first place that I see where it gets cut off. Say, for example, if birth gets interrupted by hospital procedures, right? The mother has the intuition, for example, to walk instead of lie down, but the hospital says you can't walk. You have an IV now. Now you have to lay down and you have to lay on your back, instead of following her own intuition, and that gets imprinted onto the child. Or for people who had their whole birth process interrupted by, say, a C-section, for example. And there are all kinds of different reasons why that happens. And again, as we talk about trauma and birth imprints, it's important to say that these things are resolvable. And you didn't do anything wrong if you were a mother or a doctor or anybody in that whole process. But it's important to talk about, so we can recognize where some of these imprints come in. And the more awareness we have, the more easily we can resolve them. But say, for example, someone has a planned C-section. For whatever reason, doctor, mother decided we're going to schedule it on such and such day. Those children often grow up to have difficulty knowing their direction because their original imprint, it's called, there's a moment in the birth process called ignition. And that's when the child, the baby says, okay, there's this flood of hormones that causes this ignition and this drive to now be born. But if that original ignition gets cut off because your birth got scheduled or interrupted in some way, then you might lack connection to that ignition in your life, in projects, in your purpose. And so the way we come back to it, it's important to talk about the fact that we can resolve these things. So if this is your story, you're not stuck, but is to find when you feel excited about something. That, and for some people, it's going to be more subtle than others, depending on those imprints. So when you feel that excitement or curiosity, to start building that muscle and following it. I often, with my clients who feel stuck in this way, I prescribe play dates, adventure days, where you just open your schedule and literally just follow your excitement, however subtle it is. Like, I feel suddenly drawn to go to this cafe, or I feel drawn to go to the beach today or to the mountains or whatever, but just following that excitement and building that muscle again to know what your ignition is and how to follow it.
Yeah, that's beautiful. It's like a yes day. You just say yes to everything that comes.
Yes, I love that. A yes day.
Beautiful. I had not heard that about ignition, so I think that's very helpful as well. And a reminder to trust yourself, like you said, that many times when we find ourselves saying, I don't know, that we want to question that. And even we were talking before we started recording about where the kids have to raise their hand to speak, or we're taught to look for someone else for permission for everything, to go to the restroom, to eat, to speak, to have a voice, to desire something. And so we want to start to pay attention to those times where we feel that we're looking for someone else to give us permission, and really come back to trusting ourselves and making that conscious choice that it is safe to trust yourself. I think a lot of times that it can seem as though we have lost our own trust, and yet that is through the process of the toxic relationship or societal conditioning or whatever it might be, that in the end you truly can trust yourself. And in fact, the more you trust yourself, the more successful you'll be, and the more likely you will be able to step into your purpose and find your gifts and things of that nature. So trust is such a huge component to this healing process. Trust as well as in the divine. Yes, I know that there's an external force that is assisting the body in healing. And so trusting in life, right? Trusting in God, source, creator, divine universe, whatever word you feel is necessary, that you are cared for, you will be supported, you are guided, there is a path and there is a plan. And so that trust is lost in so many ways that it can initially help us when we reclaim that.
Yeah, absolutely. And teaching yourself that what you said is really important, that it's safe to follow my excitement. It's safe to trust myself. It's safe to trust this curiosity. It's safe to play. It's safe to take a risk and see what happens.
Yeah. Yeah. It reminds me of our needs too, right? We stop trusting our needs. In fact, we stop trusting ourselves so much that we doubt that what we need is valid, doubt that we deserve to have our needs met. And I remember it was kind of that first aha light bulb moment when I went into therapy and he told me I deserve to have my needs met. And I literally, I felt like my jaw hit the floor. It was like, I knew it. Somebody finally validated that. And I like to remind my clients that you have to have your needs met in order to be to reach your highest potential, to be at your peak performance, whatever it is that you're desiring, right? To step into your purpose, to live a life that you love. Any of those things require you having your needs met, right? To raise your vibration. Those needs are part of your blueprint. They're part of your plan. You are made perfectly imperfect for a purpose. And without those needs being met, you'll never be able to accomplish that. And so trusting your needs, right? Trusting that you deserve to have those needs met and being willing to put in the effort to meet those needs as well.
Yeah. Willing to put in the effort and really take care of yourself. And it comes back again to the body as well, that self-care of the body. I think a lot of us who are heart-centered, soul-centered, people who want to do good in the world, sometimes we are so connected to soul, to spirit, that we forget or deny the body. And it's really through the vessel of the body that our purpose is gifted to the world. And so it starts with self-care. And taking care of the body.
Yeah. Yeah. You remind me too how common it is for people to disassociate from the body, right? And in the guise of being, soul-centered or heart-led or spiritual or whatever it might be, we tend to live in these upper chakras, but that's also a trauma response. To try to escape the body, to try to figure it out, to always be in the hamster wheel of the mind, trying to solve the problem, a hyper self-focus. It's not being selfish or self-centered, but it actually is a trauma response because it's designed to help you survive. And we justify that, this 3D life is hard and I'm a spiritual being and I don't belong here. And we give ourselves this excuse to live up here and we want to escape. We don't want to be here. And we adopt or allow the belief that life has to be difficult and that this 3D plane is painful and that I can't be happy here. And instead of rectifying that belief or challenging that belief or healing that belief, we allow ourselves to sort of opine for this other reality that we can't get to until we pass to the next life. When what I've seen evidence of in my own life, as well as in the clients, when we heal, we make friends with the body, we come back down, we ground into this reality that we chose to incarnate in. We have a purpose, and life can be meaningful and fulfilling and enjoyable and delicious and fun if we heal and we make friends with the body and we appreciate and have gratitude for where we are and we want to be here. And I liken it to having a sports car without the instructions on how to drive it. That we have this amazing vessel that is so fascinating and so fun and so cool when you learn how to manage your mind and to heal your conditioning, your traumas, your programming. You work with the body, you vibrate so high. It's dizzying sometimes how fun it can be. It really is enjoyable. And I'm just curious if you find that in your clients too, that there's sort of that tendency to disassociate and yet a healing and enjoyment when we do come back to the body.
Yeah, absolutely. And the only way is through, right? So often we want to dissociate because it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to go into these places that are painful or that are holding those memories that we couldn't be with when we were little. So I don't want to go there now. Why would I want to go there? I've locked it away. I don't want to, but with that empathic witness, with that support, and you go into the body. I keep using my hand like this because it is like really coming into the body, and you become the empathic witness to these pains or experiences. And then you land in the fullness of who you are instead of this fragmented version. And as we go through that experience down into the body, that is the only way that heaven gets created on earth. And we realize like, oh, I was the hands and the eyes and the voice of God all along. Because how else is God going to be expressed on this planet if not through us, especially those of us who are spiritual, who are heart-led? It's on us to get into our bodies and to use these vehicles for the miracles that they're meant to perform in this world, in this realm.
Yeah. And what greater experience? I think we're looking for connection. We're looking for the guidance, the oneness. We're looking for the peace, the joy, the fulfillment, but we think it's out here. We think it is, in the Pleiades or, in the fifth dimension or in some other place that I'm not. It's actually not the truth. And it's so freeing when you finally really truly embody at a cellular level what it means to be here now, what it means to be at one, what it really means to be peace, what it means to get out of your own way, right? All of these things that we hear and we think we understand, and then you finally rest in the body and you realize it's all available to you, and we are tremendously powerful. And what greater fun experience. This is why we chose to incarnate here, is to experience that. So
yeah, absolutely.
So solutions to healing, aside from, somatic healing, which we certainly can talk more about, but I personally have found that, yes, the somatic healing is the first step. You cannot bypass it. You cannot move through these blocks without that somatic healing. And also something you said, I wanted to reiterate, is that compassionate witness. I know I will try to brain spot on my own, and I don't have I'll give myself some credit. Sometimes I have the discipline to sit there and be with it, but not always. And having that other person on the other side can be really helpful. If I know you're with me, I'm not going to allow myself to be distracted or pick up the phone or go let the dog out, right? I'm going to stay there with you. And that can be really helpful. But other solutions I noticed too is after the somatic therapy, I noticed about 6 sessions, so 6 weeks to 3 months, right around there, is when we really start to see the blocks are removed, and we're starting to see the renewed version of you, remembering the blueprint, remembering your truth come through. And then from there, we start to realize what your value and worth is, right? What is your purpose? Trusting and surrendering in yourself. So what are some other solutions that you see that sort of are paired with the somatic healing, or maybe come after that phase?
Yeah, I think what you just said is really important. Like, once they start to connect with that worthiness or that excitement or that curiosity of life again, what's really, really important is taking action from that place. And we talked about that earlier about the yes days. But being able to follow those impulses and do something with them, take those risks. So if someone is feeling excited about starting their podcast, writing their book, start with the first page, start with something, but give it somewhere to go is really important. Next step, because like once we unlock this blueprint, we got to start to give it direction. And so having clear direction, knowing what your North Star is. So I do a lot of work with my clients on, and we talked about this before as well, your values, your desire for your life. What direction do you want to go? Because we don't ask children that when we put them in schools and we tell them, this is what you have to do. You need to do X, Y, and Z to get the good grades, to get this, and this is your path, right? We don't ask children, what do you like? What do you want? And so once we start to unlock this blueprint, you get to start asking yourself, what do you like? What do you want? What do you want for your life? And really letting yourself go into your imagination and into the possibility and the potential that is there for you, outside of what you were told you were supposed to do, outside of what society said was for you or not for you. You get to decide now. So creating that North Star, that vision for your life, and then taking action toward it every single day. Small actions, really important to move the body in a way that is in alignment with your North Star. So for example, if someone has recently opened up their throat, for example, their ability to share, to speak, it's really important to do vocal toning, to honor this new opening. So maybe you're not on a stage singing yet, but doing practices every day to open up your throat chakra. Or for people who have recently found safety in their body again, to build strength in your body, go lift weights, go like really honor that newfound connection to that part of you, whatever that is. So that's why it's also helpful to have mentorship to help sort of guide you in a direction like, okay, now we're opening up the throat chakra. Let's go there. Let's figure out what practices you need to honor that.
Yeah, it's fun to see that there are pretty distinct phases that as they move through the healing process. I've been working on a couple videos lately where you can pretty much define what phase you're in, and there's even relatively similar time frames that go with these phases. So as I think this is sort of a new trend, if you will. I don't want to call it a trend because that sounds egoic, but rather collectively, our society globally, people are becoming aware of trauma, and we're starting to bring more focus to the healing. And so over the next 5 or 10 years, it'll be pretty clear on what we're working with and what the processes are to move through. And it's not as elusive as it has seemed for so long. So that's really, really fascinating. I love that suggestion too, I almost get this urge, right? You want to move your body in the direction of, physically in the direction of whatever is calling you, whatever brings you joy, whatever lights you up, whatever you're curious about, right? And challenging the I don't know and asking why 5 times and going below that block of I don't know, and just testing things, right? I like to use the analogy of soup, right? You add a little of the salt and you add a little water and you add a little starch and you taste it and you see how it is. And like, yeah, I kind of don't like it. It's a little too salty. So maybe we need a little more salt, or, let it marinate, sit on it overnight, think about it, ponder it, add something different, play, right? And allow yourself to alchemize life. And that's really what this is all about. There was another guy, I wish I could remember his name. He said yesterday that we are like Legos, that we're a Lego set and we come disassembled and we feel like we're broken because I'm just all of these pieces and I don't make, a castle or a ship. But really, it's your job to put together the Lego pieces, to construct yourself, to build yourself into the thing that you were made to be. And I thought that was such a perfect analogy for sort of the processes that we help guide each other through, or our clients through. Yeah, there was something else you said, but there's so many good things you say. It's hard to recall them all. Oh, action, taking action. So I also have noticed that perfectionism is part of the trauma response, that we feel we have to have everything thought out. You mentioned the word clarity. We feel we have to have clarity before we take action. And I have noticed that you cannot figure out things from the level of the mind. You will not be able to find your purpose without action. You will not be able to strengthen your gift without sharing it. And so you may be a singer, like you said, and you may feel like, I don't know how to sing professionally, or I'm not very good at this yet, or who am I, or what do I have to offer? Or, what value do they get from this? But that question is the block. That disbelief is the block. And we do the somatic therapy to move through that block. And then we go out and do the thing, because that's what causes it to grow. Right. And I come from the corporate world where you had to have the 5-year roadmap and the milestone and the checklist and all this stuff, right? Very linear. It just doesn't work that way. Right? That we're meant to go out in our imperfect state and test it and try it. And ideas grow through being shared, and so do talents and gifts. So action is, to your point, an absolute critical piece to the puzzle.
Yeah. And knowing too that action is going to take you out of your comfort zone. I think a lot of times people start that process like, okay, I'm excited about this, or I'm curious about this, and it starts to feel uncomfortable, and they think, oh no, that's a problem. I feel uncomfortable. I don't feel confident and perfectly poised. So they go back into their comfort zone, when in reality, that discomfort is actually the doorway to your purpose. And you start to develop a relationship with that discomfort. It starts to become less scary, and more you start to realize, oh, when I lean into this discomfort, when I take this action from my ignition, from my inspiration, I take this action, and it's a little uncomfortable, but then all of a sudden I'm on the other side and I'm doing things that I love, and I'm sharing my gifts, and people's lives are changing, and my life is changing. And oh, here's another one. Oh, now I'm feeling called to go on bigger stages, or whatever the calling is. Now I'm uncomfortable again, but because I've gone through those layers of discomfort in the past, okay, it's safe. Again, that safety and trust. It's safe for me to explore this new direction, this new expansion. So I say that to say that if you start on this path and you start taking action in the direction of your excitement, your joy, your curiosity, and you feel uncomfortable, it's okay. Like, keep going. It's part of the process.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that you say make friends with the discomfort, right? Like it is interesting because again, in the dualistic world that we live in, we have to find the balance, right? That many times discomfort, especially to a traumatized nervous system, discomfort means run, shut down, fight, flight, fawn, freeze, right? But now we're no longer in that threatening place. We're no longer in the unsafe place or on the battlefield, right? So we need to start questioning, being more discerning with the discomfort, right? And understanding that it has a message for us. There's a gift in it. And it might be telling us that a pivot is necessary. It might be telling us that a break is necessary, not quitting, but slowing down. It might be telling us that on the other side of this discomfort is something really freaking amazing, right? And athletes will tell you that nervousness and excitement feel the same, that we have labeled or chosen a perspective of discomfort as always being negative when it doesn't have to be. And I find a perfect example would be the recent holiday season, right? Where a lot of people were off and I took some time off and I got sick and my body was asking me to rest. And it was clear that I needed to rest, and I did. But then there came a point where it was like, I feel really uncomfortable right now. And the old trauma brain wants to say, you shouldn't have taken that time off. You shouldn't have rested so much. You should have worked harder. But really, what that uncomfortable moment was trying to say was, we're done resting now. It's okay that we've rested. We needed that rest, but we're done now. Now it's time to take action again. Right. And so that discomfort doesn't have to be, oh my gosh, I failed, or everything's bad, wrong, and broken, and now I'm in a puddle and we've spiraled into self-deprecating thoughts again. Rather, it just means, okay, now's a pivot point. Let's shift back into action because we're fully rested and healed now. Right.
Yeah.
Discerning that voice.
Yeah. And again, it goes back to the work that we were talking about that happens in the very beginning, which is the somatic work and learning, what do these sensations in my body mean? What are they trying to tell me? None of it is wrong. Not even pain isn't wrong. It's got a message. It has something to say. And so the same when we're, farther down our path, going into the discomfort and going, what is this trying to tell me? Is this trying to tell me I need to rest more? Or is this trying to tell me that it's time for me to take action? And that's where that intimacy with your own body, your own sensations becomes really important. And that's why it starts with coming into the body, because you're going to need that navigation system as you move forward in your purpose and bringing your gifts out into the world.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's worth reiterating what you said there, because it probably was one of the most important pieces that people need to hear is nothing is bad. Nothing is wrong. Nothing is broken. No amount of negative self-talk will ever help you. And I think that is such a critical component for the people that I've worked with, is this, and people call it the inner critic, but I don't think that's a strong enough label for what the trauma brain will do to you.
Mm-hmm.
It is an oppressor. It is an abuser. We literally have taken on the voice of, in trauma situations, we have taken on the voice of the abuser as our own. And we beat ourselves up every day thinking that somehow if I tell myself how bad I was yesterday, I'll be better tomorrow. And it's not true. It's simply not true. No amount of negativity will ever benefit you. And so just recognizing that voice at any time it is mean, anytime it tries to berate you or tear you down, that is not your voice. That is the voice of drama. And I like to imagine, the little demon and the angel on the shoulders, and I just flick him off. I'm like, not today, like my little trauma demon is punished and banished, because he's not mine, and that's not helpful, and that's not going to carry me to where I want to go. So it's worth noting. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. That's important.
And that reminds me, judgment, right? The judgment of ourselves actually is an indication when we are in resistance to ourselves or to our life, or we have a lack of trust in ourselves. And so people often ask, how do I find my blocks? How do I work through my triggers? Two different questions that actually lead or are resolved by the same solution. And it's noticing when you're in judgment or in resistance, because your block is the resistance or the judgment of the situation, that it should be something different than it is. And also the trigger, right? When you feel triggered by something, if you feel that animated response to something, you act more aggressively than someone else would, then that's an indication that you are wounded in that area. There's an opportunity for healing, and you are also in judgment or resistance to that situation. So do you find that showing up for you and your clients and in your work?
Yeah, absolutely. That we often, get stuck in judgment or in those triggers. And I teach my clients that triggers are treasures. So when you get triggered, it's because there's a treasure there. It's because, and the reason there's so much activation in that trigger is because there's a tremendous amount of energy locked up in some story there or some trauma there. So when you experience triggers, the work is to go, again, it's always to go there. Instead of avoiding it, instead of projecting it onto someone else or blaming someone else, it's your fault I feel this way, it's the government's fault I feel this way, it's whatever. What if I go into it? What if I treat it as though there is an immense amount of energy, treasure there? What if I go into it and explore it and find out, what is this? What is this connected to? What is it connected to in my child? What does this remind me of? Why do I feel limited or upset or whatever is coming up in there? And how do I unlock that and treasure for myself? And that's the advanced work, because often when we have a trigger, I call it like a hot potato and we want someone else to carry it. Like, I don't want to, but if you can stand to hold your own hot potato of trigger long enough to explore it and learn what it's there to show you, it becomes this incredible resource of energy, because that's really what it is. It's a packet of energy that's locked up. So if you can hold it long enough to explore it and take responsibility for it, you will unlock a tremendous amount of literal energy. Like, I've been with people, and even in my own experience, who help people hold that hot potato, and they end up feeling like they've never had this much aliveness in their body before. They feel empowered, they feel alive, they feel ready to take on the world. So triggers are treasures for sure. And yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It reminds me of what you were saying earlier about going in, right? We go in to find it, and then it's as if we grab it, pull it out, and it's like pulling the cork out of a bottle, right? That we release all of this energy, and it's amazing who you are and who you were made to be comes up with that, right? Underneath what was buried before. So beautiful. I love that. Triggers are treasures. That's, yes, absolutely. It's like giant arrows are pointing at, right here is where you need to do the work. Right?
Yeah.
Come fix this thing that is triggered in you, and that's going to relieve so much for you and open so much for you, open new doors. Beautiful. And that was our next point, was triggers were gifts. So that was perfect. Emotions are friends. How would you say that shows up for you in your work? How do you help your clients interpret their emotions?
Well, you've probably heard this before, and your listeners probably have too, but the best way to see them is emotion is energy in motion. That's all it is. And the more that we can give it permission to be in motion, to be felt, the quicker it resolves. We don't have to be stuck in pain, emotional or physical, is a symptom of resistance. If we can actually fully go into the pain, whether it's emotional or physical, really fully go there without judgment, without resistance, which is, again, that's the advanced practice, it turns into something else. It's not actually painful. The pain is a result of the resistance. And so if we can go into whatever the feeling is, those challenging emotions, I forget his name, but there's a quote that says, gosh, was it Joseph Campbell might have said it? Any feeling fully felt is bliss. Any feeling fully felt is bliss. And I've been in sessions with people where they have this emotional pain that they feel like I just can't hold it. I can't hold this hot potato. And I'll sit with them, and we become that compassionate witness with them, with the pain. And the more that we do that, more compassion, more allowing, less resistance. I've seen people turn intense grief into joy, and they're like looking at me like, how did that just happen? And is it okay that I'm feeling joy right now? Because I was just feeling like the most pain I've ever felt in my life. And now all of a sudden I'm feeling joy. Like, is this okay? But it is possible when we can compassionately fully feel our emotions. And again, people feel that energy flowing. All of a sudden it's like, wow, I feel joy. I feel bliss. I feel like free in my body because we sort of took the lid off of the resistance on the emotion. So the more that we can allow emotion to just be energy and motion and just see what it wants to do, where does it want to go? What are the textures of this grief? What if I don't call it grief, if I don't put the story on top of it, what's just the sensation of this energy that wants to move? And that takes the judgment off of it, and that allows the energy to flow.
Yeah, beautifully said. Yeah, and I think society has taught us too that it's too uncomfortable. Like you say, it's the hot potato. Don't look at it. Don't look at it. Right? Cognitive dissonance has caused us to ignore the pain, the triggers, the emotions, and that is actually what keeps it there. That is the conundrum, right? The backwards lesson that we've been given, that if we had just spent time with it, that would be what caused it to dissipate. I love that quote, right? That any feeling fully felt ultimately will end in bliss. That if we can start to integrate that new program, then we would have more of a desire to sit with and be with the emotion. And I think many times big emotions, big scary emotions are uncomfortable, and we can fear that they will never go away. And I think for me, that was something that was difficult for a long time. I feared that it would always hurt this much. And you don't realize that just by being with it causes it to leave. And the more we do that, the more bliss we can experience, the more blocks we work through, the more energy is freed up for purpose and passion and living life and creating beautiful things.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. I guess the last thing I would want to talk about is education and how this kind of starts for all of us. Maybe it is parents, maybe it is schooling, maybe it's just a collective societal message that if you don't buy this, you're not good enough, right? But education typically tends to be where most of this starts for many of us, I guess. And given your experience as a teacher for 15 years, I'd love to hear how you have seen this play out through the education system.
Yeah. Even where I worked, so I worked in prestigious private schools on the West Coast, progressive schools. So I thought, okay, I had volunteered in public schools, and I was like, gosh, this system's really messed up. I don't think I can be the kind of teacher that I want to be in a public school. So I ended up working in progressive private schools. But even there, because of the nature of the system of putting 30 kids in a classroom with one teacher, those were the kind of schools that I taught at. There are different models, but just by that alone, it creates this unnatural system that doesn't allow the unique genius of each child to be fully expressed, because we have to maintain classroom order. We talked about raising hands earlier. I told you before, but I'll say it for your listeners. I started to see how the school, just the system itself, is creating limitations on kids, their genius, their curiosity, their excitement. So I was always thinking, how can I bring freedom to them? How can I free this up so that they can trust themselves? Because I know that that's a big piece for them as they grow up. They're going to need to be able to trust themselves. And as a teacher, when I ask them to raise their hand, and I have 10 kids raising their hand, and then I, the teacher, the authority, go and pick a child, what is that message? What is that imprint that's happening to the rest of the children? And so I thought, well, I'm going to get rid of this raising the hands business, and I'm going to teach my classroom of 5 and 6 year olds how to have a natural conversation, just like they would at the dinner table. So I talked to my principal, and she was supportive but amused by my proposal. She said, okay, why don't you try it for a week and get back to me? She had been an educator for like 30 years, so she already knew what I was in for. But I loved that she let me explore it. So I taught the kids, this is how we're going to do it. You know, when you're at the dinner table, you're not raising your hand. You just naturally wait for your turn and what excites you and what part of the conversation and la, la, la. And so I tried it and it was a complete disaster. 20, I had 27 5-year-olds, just talking over each other. And I was like, okay, so we have to go back to raising our hands. We can't have 27 5-year-olds just speaking every time that they are excited. And that broke my heart. They can't speak when they're excited. They can't be heard. In the moment that an inspiration, an idea comes to their mind, they have to suppress it. And it broke my heart, but it made me realize that it was the system itself, even the most well-meaning teachers. We don't have anything on that system because the system isn't designed to allow the freedom of curiosity, of joy, of inspiration to flow. And so that's eventually I left teaching because I couldn't do what I wanted to do with the children. It was just really heartbreaking. And you and I have talked about possible other models. Like, are there other models for supporting that expression of our genius? And there are, and we'll have more conversations about that. But
what it reminds me of as you tell the story again is the compassionate observer, right? And they needed that compassionate observer in that moment. And even when you think about ideas needing to be shared to grow, it's almost as if there may be an opportunity for more of the children to be one-on-one. But again, we'll brainstorm offline on that one. But
yeah. And one of the things that I did too as a teacher, once I started to see these, so back to education and those of us who are caregivers or teachers, one thing is just pointing out that the system itself is flawed. Just saying to the kids, like, okay, it didn't work for us to not raise our hands, but here's why. It's not because your excitement is wrong. It's not because your desire to share out loud is wrong. It's because of the way that this classroom is set up and we just can't all talk at once. And so just explaining to them that it's not you, it's the system. Like there were other things that the kids would be like, I don't want to wear shoes, or I don't want to sit all day, or whatever things. And, I would just explain to them, I agree with you. That's a dumb rule. I wish we could be barefoot too, but these are the rules of the school. And it's because it's to keep everybody safe. And I understand that you want to play outside in the sand all day. I understand. So just giving them that acknowledgement. I see that you want to play in the sand all day. I see that you want to be barefoot. I see that you want to climb the tree. And I want you to be able to do that. It's just that in this context, we can't do that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it can be helpful for everyone here in the community too, to understand what the other needs, right? That as we move through life and day-to-day life, whether it's children or adults, that every single person needs that compassionate, empathetic observer, that the other, right? That we are made for connection. There are obvious biological and neurobiological components to our being, the way we are made, that we have to have connection. And that's why they put prisoners in isolation in prison. That is the ultimate punishment, right? To be alone. And so to move through life and understanding we can't snap our fingers and fix the education system today. We understand it's not working, but we together as a community, and anyone whoever interacts with this video or your channel, and we'll leave links below on how people can connect with you. But just remembering to be present with the other is far more valuable than we ever could have imagined. And just to honor the other and how they perceive things, what they need, what they're excited about, right? And just to see them and really see that we are all one, and that there's divinity in every single one of them, and it's all valid and worthy. So
wow. And just on that note, what you just said, honoring the other, the only way that we can do that, whether it's children or our friends or our clients, the only way that we can honor the other is if we also honor ourselves, and if we also eradicate that oppressor, that inner bully, that inner oppressor from our own inner vocabulary, so that we can be that compassionate witness for ourselves. Then we can serve, and only from that place can we serve.
Absolutely. Yeah. You remind me of a client who said the other day, I was asking her how she was coming along in her purpose, and she said, you know what, I felt like my purpose was me first, and I'll get to the rest later. And that was so profound. I loved that she said that, because that really, created a light bulb for me, that we want our purpose. We want to step into our purpose and being valuable and having a fulfilling life. But in order to do that, our purpose initially is healing ourselves.
It has to start there. Yeah.
Yeah. Beautiful. Well, I have really enjoyed this conversation. Is there anything else that you wanted to share with us before we break today?
I think just find your excitement, follow your excitement, and wherever you get stuck, find community, support, mentors that can help you move through whatever stuckness, because life wants to move through you. Life wants to thrive. Your purpose wants to move through you. So if you ever get stuck, you don't have to stay there. And the stuckness gets resolved when you have compassionate witnesses, mentors, community that understand you, can see you, and help you resolve that.
Yeah, there are no brownie points for going it alone.
Yeah, no.
So we will link everything below, but let us know, where can we find you in the other channels?
Yeah, so you can find me at leandrarose.com. You can also find me on Instagram at The Radiant Rebellion. That's my company, The Radiant Rebellion. You can find me there. And coming up soon, I have a mastermind. Speaking of community, I have a mastermind called Chrysalis for visionaries who are stepping into their purpose work, and creating businesses out of it. So I help you, and we as a community, as a mastermind, help each other to embody that soulpreneur, that entrepreneurial spirit, and bring your gifts into the world so that you can thrive while you're doing it. So if that is interesting, there is a wait list on my website at leandrarose.com. You can get on the wait list. We'll be opening that up really soon. So if you're looking for community, that's a good place to start.
Beautiful. And we'll make sure to include the links below as well.
Okay, wonderful.
Well, thank you, Leandra. I cannot wait for our next conversation. I've enjoyed this time so much. So thank you for gracing us with your presence.
Likewise, thank you.
Thank you.